Captain Mayne Reid's sense. What is their deduction of metaphysical attributes but a shuffling and matching of pedantic dictionary adjectives, aloof from morals, aloof from human needs, something that might be worked out from the mere word God by one of those logical machines of wood and brass which recent ingenuity has contrived, as well as by a man of flesh and blood? They have the trail of the serpent over them. One feels that in the theologian's hands they are only a set of titles obtained by a mechanical manipulation of synonyms. Verbality has stepped into the place of vision, professionalism into that of life. Instead of bread we have a stone, instead of a fish a serpent. Did such a conglomeration of abstract terms give really the gist of our knowledge of the deity, schools of theology might indeed continue to flourish. But religion, vital religion, would have taken its flight from this world. What keeps religion going is something else than abstract definitions and symptoms of concatenated adjectives, and something different from faculties of theology and their professors. All these things are after-effects, secondary accretions upon those phenomena of vital conversation with the unseen divine, of which I have shown you so many instances, renewing themselves in secula seculorum in the lives of humble private men. So much for the metaphysical attributes of God. From the point of view of practical religion, the metaphysical monster which they offer to our worship is an absolutely worthless invention of the scholarly mind. What shall we now say of the attributes called moral? Pragmatically, they stand on an entirely different footing. They positively determine fear and hope and expectation, and are foundations for the saintly life. It needs but a glance at them to show how great is their significance. God's holiness, for example. Being holy, God can will nothing but the good. Being omnipotent, he can secure its triumph. Being omniscient, he can see us in the dark. Being just, he can punish us for what he sees. Being loving, he can pardon too. Being unalterable, we can count on him securely. These qualities enter into connection with our life. It is highly important that we should be informed concerning them. That God's purpose in creation should be the manifestation of his glory is also an attribute which has definite relations to our practical life. Among other things, it has given a definite character to worship in all Christian countries. If dogmatic theology really does prove beyond dispute that a God with characters like these exists, she may well claim to give a solid basis to religious sentiment. But verily, how stands it with her arguments? It stands with them as ill as with the arguments for his existence. Not only do post-Kantian idealists reject them root and branch, but it is a plain historic fact that they never have converted anyone who has found in the moral complexion of the world, as he experienced it, reasons for doubting that a good God could have framed it. To prove God's goodness by the scholastic argument that there is no non-being in his essence would sound to such a witness simply silly. No, the book of Job went over this whole matter once for all and definitely. Ratiocination is a relatively superficial and unreal path to the deity. Quote, "I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee." Close quote. An intellect perplexed and baffled, yet a trustful sense of presence. Such is the situation of the man who is sincere with himself and with the facts, but who remains religious still. Footnote: Pragmatically, the most important attribute of God is his punitive justice. But who, in the present state of theological opinion on that point, will dare maintain that hellfire or its equivalent in some shape is rendered certain by pure logic? Theology herself has largely based this doctrine upon revelation, and in discussing it, has tended more and more to substitute conventional ideas of criminal law for a priori principles of reason. But the very notion that this glorious universe, with planets and winds and laughing sky and ocean, should have been conceived and had its beams and rafters laid in technicalities of criminality, is incredible to our modern imagination. It weakens a religion to hear it argued upon such a basis. End footnote. We must therefore, I think, bid a definite goodbye to dogmatic theology. In all sincerity, our faith must do without that warrant. Modern idealism, I repeat, has said goodbye to this theology forever. Can modern idealism give faith a better warrant, or must she still rely on her poor self for witness? The basis of modern idealism is Kant's doctrine of the transcendental ego of apperception. By this formidable term, Kant merely meant the fact that the consciousness "I think them" must, potentially or actually, accompany all our objects. Former skeptics had said as much, but the "I" in question had remained for them identified with the personal individual. Kant abstracted and depersonalized it, and made it the most universal of all his categories, although for Kant himself the transcendental ego had no theological implications. It was reserved for his successors to convert Kant's notion of Bewusstsein-Überhaupt, or abstract consciousness, into an infinite concrete self-consciousness which is the soul of the world, and in which our sundry personal self-consciousness have their being. It would lead me into technicalities to show you even briefly how this transformation was in point of fact effected. Suffice it to say that in the Hegelian school, which today so deeply influences both British and American thinking, two principles have borne the brunt of the operation. The first of these principles is that the old logic of identity never gives us more than a post-mortem dissection of disjecta membra, and that the fullness of life can be construed to thought only by recognizing that every object which our thought may propose to itself involves the notion of some other object which seems at first to negate the first one. The second principle is that to be conscious of a negation is already virtually to be beyond it. The mere asking of a question or expression of a dissatisfaction proves that the answer or the satisfaction is already imminent. The finite, realized as such, is already the infinite in posse. Applying these principles, we seem to get a propulsive force into our logic, which the ordinary logic of a bare, stark self-identity in each thing never attains to. The objects of our thought now act within our thought, act as objects act when given an experience. They change and develop. They introduce something other than themselves along with them, and this other, at first only ideal or potential, presently proves itself also to be actual. It supersedes the thing at first supposed, and both verifies and corrects it in developing the fullness of its meaning. The program is excellent. The universe is a place where things are followed by other things that both correct and fulfill them, and a logic which gave us something like this movement of fact would express truth far better than the traditional school logic, which never gets of its own accord from anything to anything else, and registers only predictions and subsumptions, or static resemblances and differences. Nothing could be more unlike the methods of dogmatic theology than those of this new logic. Let me quote in illustration some passages from the Scottish transcendentalist whom I have already named. Principal Card writes, "How are we to conceive of the reality in which all intelligence rests?" He replies, quote, "Two things may without difficulty be proved, viz., that this reality is an absolute spirit, and conversely, that it is only in communion with this absolute spirit or intelligence that the finite spirit can realize itself. It is absolute, for the faintest movement of human intelligence would be arrested, if it did not presuppose the absolute reality of intelligence, of thought itself,